Kelly, and today I'm going to be showing you the story of ancient Egypt seen through artifacts. I am going to be presenting 6 different artifacts from the 6 most important times of Egypt's history. The first time that we are going to be talking about is the pre-dynastic age. This is the time before the unification of Egypt in 3050 BC. During this time, the first people started settling along the Nile River. The pre-dynastic age is split up into 2 cultural phases, the Badarian phase and the Naqada phase. The time that we're going to be most talking about is the Badarian phase, as that is where our first artifact comes from. We can tell that these are from the Badarian age due to the style of the pottery. Badarian pottery is red polished with a black polish either along the rim or the bottom, or actually both sometimes. As you can see, it is only on the rim. These 2 vessels were found in a tomb. We do not know if they were ever used for daily life, as much of the domestic towns and cities have not survived for today. This is because the moist and fertile Nile soil is hard to preserve, while in the desert, the hot and dry harshness oftentimes helps to preserve tombs and everything inside the tombs. I chose these 2 Badarian pots because it shows an example of the practical and simple life that they lived and how their crafts and arts have evolved from the very beginning. As Egypt is very well known for its artistic licenses, and many items from ancient Egypt are very, very finely crafted. And it is no different here in the Badarian age. Also, it shows how simple the life was. We find no amulets or statuettes. All we find are vessels and pots and bowls, pottery of all sorts, and baskets sometimes as well. More practical things, but we don't know if they were used in real life, in regular life. The next time that we are going to be talking about is the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom is very well known among people due to the Great Pyramids of Giza and the Sphinx. Many things changed after the unification of Egypt. All the city-states came together and formed one country, and a pharaoh ruled from the throne. He had absolute power over all of his people, and he ruled the entirety of Upper, which is southern, and Lower, which is northern Egypt. He had a multitude of advisors, such as scholars, scribes, war generals, and priests. They all were loyal to him, as he was thought to be divine and descended from the gods either Re, who is a sun god, or Amun. He oftentimes had great monuments built to express his divinity, such as huge stone pyramid tombs and sphinxes and temples and many other places of that sort. There are many other different innovations. The Old Kingdom started working with stone instead of just a mud brick or wood, and they created many statues of gods and sphinxes as into the practicality of the pre-dynastic age. They also found their own written language, hieroglyphs, which are very well known today and are often seen inscribed on tomb walls. Our second artifact is this recumbent stone lion. It is very large, as you can see, showing that it's from the Old Kingdom. Many Old Kingdom items were huge, and they oftentimes enjoyed showing the lions as a thing that they used. I chose this because this reflected the power of the pharaohs and the nobility of this time. Not just anyone could build such great things, it was usually nobility. So oftentimes, most likely the stone lion was built for nobility or for the pharaoh. It also shows the style of the Old Kingdom of how large things were. The next period we're going to be talking about is the Middle Kingdom. The Old Kingdom disappeared when the entire country fragmented into different warlord states. Again, then there were two groups. They all joined together into two groups. The Thebans in the south and a northern line of warlords that settled in Heracleopolis, which is in northern Egypt. They fought each other for quite a while, and then the Thebans defeated this northern line and became the pharaohs and reunified Egypt. This brought to the Middle Kingdom. During this time, the pyramids became smaller and were built, instead of completely out of stone, with a mud brick core with a limestone encasing around it. The arts flourished and many military alliances were made. An empire was created in northern Nubia, and things were good. Life was good for the people. During this time, many of the elite bought small statues of people, inscribed their names on it, so they would have their own little figures that would go and receive prayers and blessings and all good things during life and even in the afterlife. Now we're bringing our next object. This is a statuette of a hippopotamus made out of faience. Faience was a new innovation in the Middle Kingdom as well. It is a type of enamel that is made over pottery, as you can see. It is oftentimes dyed of very bright colors, especially in ancient Egypt, being blue or turquoise, or even black sometimes, as you can see by the little black designs. The enamel was dyed using copper and cobalt metals, which gave it the colors. This little hippopotamus I chose it because amulets and statues were very popular in the Middle Kingdom and very well known. Most people had it, even ordinary people had small, though oftentimes they were made of wood and not faience, even though they could be made out of faience as well, depending on who made it and the type of faience that was made. Hippopotamuses were very popular among Egyptians at this time. They were thought to be a form of the goddess Taweret, who aided in childbirth, young children, and new mothers. This probably was an amulet for this reason, and was used to express Taweret and the form of a strong and doting mother, as hippopotamuses were very doting and very protective of their children. The Middle Kingdom ended when central authority collapsed and a ruling of weak kings continued on. The pharaoh's rule was very, very weak. But that soon changed in the next time period that we're going to be looking at. This period is the New Kingdom. My artifact from this is a beaded necklace from Amarna. Now, during the New Kingdom, it is among the most illustrious and well-known times. Egypt became a huge empire that stretched from Syria all the way to Nubia. The kings are among the most well-known because they built huge monuments and buildings, and even their tombs were well preserved in the desert. Among these kings are Hatshepsut, who was the famous female king, Ramses the Great, and the young boy king, Tutankhamun. They had a strong military and a strong government. The kings spent most of their times in Thebes, the capital city, but they did spend a short amount of time in Amarna. During this time, This time is very well known due to the fact of the Tutankhamun's tomb and how he had lived there. Amarna was a place which was known for worshipping a solar sun god named the Aten. A few kings, such as Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti, worshipped this and allowed only their people to only worship the Aten, not any of the other gods. Unfortunately, the empire crumbled, and a line of weak pharaohs refragmented the country again. I chose this neck collar because it shows the magnificent artistry in everyday accessories. As you can see, this is made out of faience. Faience was very nice, but you can tell that it probably wasn't used for great purposes, because it was made out of faience and not lapis lazuli or gold or many of the finer things. It is made out of beads made of faience. It also shows an interesting time in Egypt's history where the people were only allowed to worship the Aten. The necklace doesn't show it itself, but the place where it comes from has so much history involved with it. The next period is the Third Intermediate Period. This period is when Egypt was again refragmented into two different places. There was a few dynasties of Libyan pharaohs in the north, and a large number of high priests ruling in the south at Thebes. Then they reunified Egypt, bringing in the late period, and that was ruled by both the local and foreign kings, often of Egyptian or Assyrian or Persian descent. During this time, Egypt perfected the art of mummification. Mummification was important because the ancient Egyptians believed that one needed to have a recognizable body to be able to go on into the afterlife. Which brings us to our next artifact, the sarcophagus of Jed or Iwethunk. Well, before we go and talk about this, first we're going to be talking about the process of mummification. First, the body was prepared to be preserved. The brain was removed through the nose with the hook stick, and then it was thrown away, as brains were thought to be very unimportant organs. Next, the lungs, intestines, stomach, and liver were removed from the body and were placed in canopic jars, each with a different being on top. One of them had a human head, one of them had a falcon head, one of them had a baboon head, and the fourth one had a jackal head. In the Third Intermediate Period, after those organs were preserved, they would be returned back to the body and would be buried along faux or solid stone canopic jars with them. But in the older times, they just left the organs in the canopic jars. The heart was kept inside the body because it was thought to be the most important organ in the body. Next, the body was covered with the natron as a type of salt, and the spices were used to plug the nose and the ears. Then, the body was left to sit and dry for 30 days. After it was dried out, the body was wrapped in linen, with the amulets tucked inside the wrappings. Oftentimes with spells from the Book of the Dead that would be needed for the afterlife. During the Third Intermediate Period, they developed a type of paper mache or linen and mud, a mixture of linen and mud called cartonnage. Cartonnage was first found in the First Intermediate Period, but it became very popular in the Third Intermediate Period. I chose this artifact because it shows another new thing that they thought of in the Intermediate Period. Back before the Intermediate Period, they would go and inscribe all of the spells and the writings from the Book of the Dead onto the tomb walls. In the Third Intermediate Period, they put it straight onto the sarcophagus. I also chose this sarcophagus because it shows how big burials were during the Third Intermediate Period and the Late Period. Next is the last period of ancient Egypt. This is called the Greco-Roman period. This period is when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. He conquered places all the way to India, where he stopped. He then returned to Egypt and ruled from Alexandria. After he died, he passed on the throne to his friend Ptolemy, who was a Macedonian Greek man. He became Ptolemy I. A line of Macedonian Greek kings by the name of Ptolemy then ruled until the Romans came. The last Ptolemaic pharaoh or ruler was the famous Cleopatra VII. She started ruling when she was 18 years old in 50 BC. She was born in 69 BC and died in 31 BC. During her reign, she attempted to ally Rome with Egypt, but unfortunately it was not successful. The Emperor Octavian fought Cleopatra and Mark Antony, who was her husband and lover at the time, and won, taking over Egypt and ruling it from then on. This brings us to our next image. Now this image is not in a museum. It is at the bottom of the ocean in Alexandria. It is a representation of the famous Queen Cleopatra, and it was found in around 2007. I chose this because it was a representation of Cleopatra, and she is one of the most well-known historical figures in Egypt, due to the fact of her infamous relationship with the Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, trying to go and form an alliance with the Romans. Fortunately, the Romans wanted Egypt nonetheless, and would just take it from them in the first place. The second reason why I chose this statue because it shows how the artistry had more of a Grecian influence than an Egyptian one. The style of the face and the body is not as much of an Egyptian, such as this one, such as the Third Intermediate picture, as this one, which is more Grecian and more portrait-like. These are my 6 artifacts. I hope that you enjoyed them, and I hope that everyone will have fun and research more about ancient Egypt. Bye!